Welcome, everyone, and welcome the internet audience. We are here this evening to enjoy some delicious bread and goodies and to learn how to possibly, if you haven't experienced yourselves, how to make a good loaf of bread. And I'm still, after years of playing around with dough, I have many challenges. Sometimes it looks pretty, other times it looks like it's gone through a volcano. But it still tastes good. So we will continue. Shall we bow our heads for prayer? Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much that we can come here and learn how to make different types of bread and to give you honor and glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Without any further ado, we will continue with the demonstrations. Mrs. Jean Baden will do the demonstrating of some quick bread and batter bread and have some information for us.
This cornbread's a little bit different. It's made with whole grain. And I've been exploring, getting a little information about whole grains. And you notice your handout, some information I gleaned, but I found out even more today that processed white flour began in the early 1800s. And it was decided by someone, it didn't say who or what group, that white bread was for the rich. And the peasants and the servants could eat the coarse bread, which was the good stuff, actually. So they began to sift out all the bran and the wheat germ so that they got just this fine white flour. And they continued to sift and sift until it was just the way they wanted it to make their cakes. And, of course, they took all the nutrients out. Because according to your handout, white bread is not the best. In here, I have 1 cup of cornmeal and 1 cup of whole wheat white flour. So you don't have to have brown flour all the time. White wheat makes white flour, but it's not, doesn't have everything taken out of it. So I have 1 cup of cornmeal, 1 cup of white flour. I'm going to add the salt and the baking soda, baking powder. And I'm going to put the honey, 2 tablespoons of honey. You can correct me if I get this wrong. And then I'll add the coconut milk, which is a strange ingredient to put in cornbread, don't you think? But you'll be surprised how good it tastes. I may need some more water with this. So then the manufacturers who began to manufacture mass-produced bread, you know, the local corner bakery used to use whole grain products. But then when they got to be big business, they began to take everything out of the bread. women began to want the finest white flour they could possibly get to make those light, delicate, white cakes. And so they took all that stuff out and kept sifting and sifting until they got white flour. Well, then they decided they couldn't really give people something that was not good for them, that was totally unnutritious. And so they enriched it. They put in thiamine, riboflavin, iron, what else was it? Niacin. And they called it enriched. They told people that it was actually better for them. Now, the reason I put the applesauce in last, because the applesauce reacts with the baking powder and it starts rising and foaming. And so you add it last and then quickly put it in your baking pan. And wasn't that easy? Of course, it's a lot easier when everything's measured out for you ahead of time. Then I like to just spray the top a little bit just to help it brown some more. And I'm going to pop that in the oven. I need a few minutes to wash my bowl out. The one I'm going to demonstrate now is the peach cobbler, or fruit cobbler. It's on the back page, I think, very back. This is the easiest thing. I don't make pie crust. Bob's disappointed in that, but my pie crust just is not good. And I've been trying for many years. So this cobbler recipe is so easy that it's surprising. This is 1 cup of the whole wheat white, 1 cup of raw sugar, and this is the salt and baking powder. The rule of thumb, in case you don't already know, with baking powder, it's 1 teaspoon for each cup of flour. Did you all know that? I just found it out. And you mix that together. The raw sugar, of course, is not as fine, but it does melt just as well as the other. And then I'm going to put 1 cup of milk. I'm using almond milk, but you can use whatever you want. I might add that in the 1800s, when the rich people decided they shouldn't eat the bran and the wheat germ, they needed the fine white flour. They were the ones who were sick. The ones who were eating the coarse bread were the ones who were healthy. Now, I sprayed the pan with this cooking spray. The real recipe that I got from my sister years and years ago said melt a stick of butter. Well, I'll have to admit it's delicious, but we don't do that anymore. So then you just pour the batter into the bowl, the pan. And this is some of our home canned peaches that we did this summer. And I've already added cornstarch. I just have to stir it up a little bit. And what you do is just dip the fruit into the dough. Sorry about that. And you can leave little spaces so that the dough will rise up between the spoonfuls of fruit. You don't want to overfill the pan, but you can put quite a bit of fruit in. 3 or 4 cups in a pan like this. That's probably about enough.
When you put in the fruit, you put cornstarch, you said?
Yeah. We can we can these peaches without sugar, without any water. We just kept squishing them down in the jar. And so they're very, very tasty.
How much cornstarch?
Well, it depends on how much liquid that you've got. The fruit, I'm not telling you how to do the fruit. You can do whatever fruit you want, however you want to do it. I don't even advise you to put raw fruit in here. Don't try to put raw apples in there. That doesn't work. Cook it first and then put it in.
Jane, approximately how much cornstarch do you use per cup? A tablespoon, 2 tablespoons?
That's one of the things I just put it in. Sorry about that.
Probably about 2 tablespoons.
Is there a rule of thumb for that? I don't know.
I don't think so, but I think if you probably use 2 tablespoons per cup, you would probably get it thick enough.
Yeah.
Repeat that over the.
What? Oh, Joan says that probably 2 tablespoons of cornstarch to a cup of liquid, would probably come out about right. I don't know. I have never heard of a rule of thumb about that. And so now I'm going to put it in the oven. And I'll show you what the finished products look like. This is the cornbread. Turns out nice, brown, and rises well. And the cobbler turns out like this. Isn't that nice? This one is peach and blueberry. So you can sample that later.
So is that the dough?
Just rises through the fruit.
Oh.
And there'll be dough throughout, but most of it comes up. But it turns out really good every time. I have used cherries, blackberries, all blueberries, all peaches, apples. You can use whatever you want, whatever you would put in a pie.
Just the apples.
Yeah, you just need to cook the apples a little bit so that they're not just raw. I don't know why, but it just doesn't cook well in this type of pie. These are whole grain crackers. I don't remember which page that's on. But this is the easiest thing to do. You just follow that recipe exactly. The best way to do it is put a piece of parchment paper out on the table or wherever you're going to roll them out. Dampen the surface and put the parchment paper on it, and it won't slide around. Put your dough on it and make it kind of a long, or whatever pan, the shape of your pan actually. And then you roll it out real thin. Lift the parchment paper onto your pan. Take a knife and score the crackers so that you can break them after they're baked. Score the dough to mark out the crackers. And you bake it for, I think I baked this about 30 minutes. But it depends on your oven. Just bake it till it's brown. You don't want to get it burned, but you want it to be nice and crisp. And then you can take it out of the oven, you let it cool, break it into pieces, and you have delicious crackers. And Anita's complaining about the cayenne pepper. You don't have to put that in.
You don't taste it.
Well, you will in these. Sometimes I even get carried away with cayenne, but it still makes it very good. And you can leave out the sesame seeds. You can do whatever you want to, just as long as you get that same consistency, and it should work just fine for you. Much better than the refined flour crackers that we get. Most of the crackers are just refined flour. So go creative and make your own. Be more healthy.
In the front of your cookbook, you'll find a note on cool rice bread. I ran across this when I was teaching, and I didn't always have time to get my bread baked before I had to be off to work. So I would make it up, put it in the pans, put it in the refrigerator, and let it rise in there. This was actually developed by a rancher's wife who had to bake a lot of bread to feed the hens. And she would make it at night, put it in the refrigerator, let it rise, and bake it off the next day. That works for just about any yeast bread that you have. For donuts, I had a recipe for spud nuts that used the cool rise method. Make it up and put it in the refrigerator. Then when I was ready to pull it out, I pull it out, roll it out, stamp out the donuts, drop them into the, after they rose for about 10 minutes, then put them in the hot fat and deep fat fried them. My family loved them. But not always the best for you. So you can use that for anyone. It says here to cover it with plastic wrap. Don't wrap it real tight because it is going to rise, and if you do get it too tight, it's not going to come up all the way. I frankly do not remember wrapping it when I was doing it. We didn't have saran wrap then either. But now they say to put a flour sack. Oftentimes, yes, it was a damp tea towel that I put over it to keep it from drying out. But that was it was an easy way to get bread done in a hurry. And so the recipe that I'm going to show you now is, it's called cool rise white bread. This recipe originally was found on the back of a Robin Hood flour sack in 1980. I don't think you'd probably find Robin Hood flour, at least in the West. It's probably one that was found in the East. It isn't in there?
We couldn't find it.
Okay. Then I will give it to you verbatim what it is, and you can write it on the back. Okay? No, that's a different one.
And it's not the cool rice whole wheat.
No. So, here it is. This makes 2 loaves. It's 5.5 to 6.5 cups of flour, 2 packages of active dried yeast. Now, you need to convert that. A package is 2¼ teaspoons. So that would be 4.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. 2 tablespoons sugar, a tablespoon salt, 1/4 cup margarine or butter. As I said, I prefer butter. And 2¼ cups of very hot tap water. I know, that's why I said, when I read the recipe, I'm thinking, this is interesting.
It would be cooler than the microwave.
That's true. Okay, so you mix the yeast, 2 cups of flour, sugar, and salt in a large bowl. Then you add the fat and the very hot tap water.
Is the butter melted?
The butter is soft. Okay, beat that 2 minutes on a medium speed. Then add a cup of flour and beat on high speed until thick and elastic. But I found it very interesting how they started out. You mix your undissolved yeast, 2 cups of flour, sugar, and salt in a bowl, and then add yes. Okay. You add a 1/4 cup of butter. I don't use margarine because once you have made your margarine, or they've made the margarine, you have created trans fats from the hydrogenation. So I use butter. And then it says to use tap water, hot tap water, which I found was interesting. Because usually you think if you use tap water, hot tap water, you're going to kill the yeast. Let's see, how much do I need? 2¼ cups. And then you add another cup of flour. Now, here is one problem that I have with many of the recipes. They don't tell you how to do your flour. Do you spoon it into the cup, or do you dip it into the cup? It used to be that you had to sift it and then measure it, and then sift it again. Then they said, time went on and they changed the flour, and they said you could dip it directly into your flour sack and pull it out and measure it that way. I don't know how this recipe was designed. One of the problems I find with recipes from the internet is the person who put them there knows exactly how they work, but they forget that other people can't read their minds. So we'll see what happens with this. And then you stir in the remaining flour gradually until you have a soft dough, which will leave the sides of the bowl.
Are you using whole wheat white or just white?
I'm just white.
Not white bread flour.
No, just white all-purpose. Totally simple bread.
So you're not adding any gluten to it then,
No,
which is what bread flour would do.
right. And you have to play with it, because sometimes you need to add Vita gluten to it just to make it. But I haven't with this. This is the Wholesome, Holsun, I think is the spelling. And the reason I use that is because this flour is non-GMO. Genetically modified. The wheat has not been genetically modified.
And what's the name of the flour again?
Wholesome,
How do you spell it?
Holsum, at Walmart.
Why use non-genetically modified flour?
Because I don't want the pesticides or the herbicide that they have used on the seed that's grown in my food. And the reason I say that is because those genes don't stay in the plant. They go into the grain of whatever it is. Grain, vegetables, whatever. Your corn, your wheat, your soy are particularly the ones that have been genetically modified so that they can use Roundup. And the canola, cotton, well, yeah. Any of that. So that's why I look for, and the wheat, the whole wheat that I use is the white whole wheat, and it's called Prairie Gold, and I find that at Walmart. And it also is non-GMO. Most people aren't too concerned about genetically modified foods, but I think there is a correlation between the diseases that we have today and the genetically modified food that we're eating. Because they'll tell you that you won't find it, but they have done other research, other people, and they have found those genes in the tissue of humans. Yes. Okay, so you get about this consistency. And you dump it out. Now, do all of you know how to knead bread? And do you know the purpose of kneading it? The kneading develops the gluten. And it's the gluten strands that hold your bread together so that it doesn't crumble. If you don't develop that gluten, you've had bread, you slice and have it fall apart on you. It's because the gluten was not developed. Yeah. Have you ever kneaded bread before?
Years ago, I haven't made bread in a long time. And then I got a bread machine on the there.
You can do these recipes in your bread machine if you want to. Do it on the dough. Put everything in it. Do it on the dough. And take it out and proceed with putting in your pans. Put it in the refrigerator if you want to. Whatever. Okay. You know that you need, if your bread is real sticky, your dough is sticky, you add more flour and you knead it in. Because if you don't, it's going to stick all over the place. So you want to knead it until it is no longer sticky.
Those banana bread or skinny bread, when I used to bake them in Bay Area, San Francisco area, they came out very nice looking, you know. The top split open,
Right.
split. When we moved to New Mexico and at 7,800 feet elevation, the bread would not spread. I mean, split. And but I'm not sure if altitude has effect on the yeast spread. I haven't seen any problem.
No, you're not going to have, what you'll have with that is the baking temperature. But with your quick breads, yeah, your altitude has a lot to do. You add, see if I can remember. You use less sugar, you increase your water, and a little less flour. That was the other. Less flour, less sugar, a little bit more water. I know when we went to Africa. I went to the Colorado Extension Service and got bulletins from them because I was going to be at 7,200 feet. And I knew that I was going to have fun with the baking up there. Well, and the other thing that affects it is how old your flour. If your flour is very old, it's going to be dry. It's going to be drier. It's lost a lot of its moisture. So you'll need more moisture to it so that it doesn't crumble.
That's why if you look at the chefs, the recipes, they use the weight.
Yes. They do it by weight. Which is fine, but I usually don't have time to do a weight. I leave that for my son. You will notice as I'm kneading, this is starting to spring back against me, which means that the gluten is pretty well developed in it. And that's what you want. You want the dough to push back against you. Okay, so in your directions, you knead it until it's smooth and stringy. Then it says to cover it with plastic wrap and a towel and let it rest on the board for 20 minutes. I'm just going to let it rest because I came off without my baking dishes. Then you punch it down, divide it in half, roll it out into a triangle, 8 inches by alongside, and roll it up, sealing it to it. Put the seam side down in your pan, brush oil across the top, and cover loosely with, they say with oiled wax paper and then plastic wrap. I've tried that, I don't like it. I would think it would be better if you try a damp tea towel over it and put it in the refrigerator. Because when I went to take off the oiled wax paper, it stuck to the top of the bread, and which started it to want to fall, and that's not the object of it. I'll let this rest.
You said something about the oil, wax paper, plastic in the pan?
Yeah, you put the bread in the pan, which I'll show you, and then you oil the top, and they say to oil the wax paper and put it on top of that, and then put the plastic wrap over that to hold it in. But what I'm finding is, it's not allowing the bread to rise like it should. And a damp tea towel will allow it to rise, and it's not going to stick.
So how long do you let it rise in the pan then?
Yeah, but do it in the refrigerator, anywhere from 2 to 24 hours. So it's nice, you see, you want fresh bread in the morning for breakfast. You mix it up the night before, put it in your pans, pull pull it out in the morning as you're getting breakfast. You don't have to let it stand about 10 minutes outside the refrigerator and then put it in the oven. And you bake it, this one you bake at 400 degrees for 30 to 40 minutes. So that's that recipe. This one here is the cool rise whole wheat. I've looked at the texture of this. It needs more flour because the texture is not fine. It's very open, which means this will crumble very readily. But these are some of the things you learn when you do take recipes off the net. Then there's potato donuts that are baked. I use olive oil. You can also use coconut oil to grease your pans. You start at the top, roll it down, tucking in the ends. Put it in and tuck your ends under. oil on the top. I'm not going to oil this because when I take it home, I'll take it off. I'll put a damp towel over it. Then you would put it in the refrigerator, take it out tomorrow morning and bake it. You'll have hot bread.
There's a recipe in there for the pecan cinnamon rolls that I made, and here's a sample of them, and it's self-explanatory. When you do take them out of the oven, you turn them over, you put a baking pan on top of the rolls and then turn them over. That way then the syrup will, good cookie sheet, baking pan, then the syrup will come down and drain onto the cinnamon rolls and make a nice topping. So this is a sample there.
Now there's one recipe here that we haven't been told about, and that's what Petra has made. Come and tell us.
There's really not much to say about it. It's gluten-free bread. Of course, it tastes different than other breads. It's a little more gooey. And you don't, the batter is more like a cake batter. You don't get to pat the loaf and shape it. It won't work. So it's from 3APN. There are a lot of different recipes out on the web, but it's something, gluten-free bread is just something you have to play with, find out which one you like.
But they're sure good toasted.
Yes, gluten-free bread, you always want to toast the bread. If you have a toaster, we don't have one here, sorry. But you still should try it out just to taste, see what it tastes like. But yeah, gluten-free bread, you want to toast, it tastes better.
Butter on it or some jam or some cream cheese or anything like that. It's really great.
Okay.
Folks, come up and try.